Hey everyone, this is Daniel from Nothing Notable, checking in with you here at the end of 2020. And listen, 2020 sucked. It was a bad year. But we don't want to focus on all of the bad things that happened. We want to focus on the good things. So in an attempt to highlight our favorite things from 2020, we've put together this series of short podcasts called The Best of 2020. We talk about our favorite television from 2020, our favorite movies, our favorite albums, some of our favorite comedy, some of our favorite YouTube channels and podcasts, and all of the stuff that helped us get through what was a terrible year. In this episode, we're talking about our favorite comedy specials, so sit back and enjoy what we thought was the best of 2020.
When I was doing some research for this year, not a lot of stand-up specials coming out this year. Not a lot of like ones that like really resonated with me, but since you started stand-up first, what was one of your favorite sets this year? Or specials, I should say. Jackie?
First of all, they weren't really specials, but I always just have to talk about Dave Chappelle. Dave, I think, is truly one of the most brilliant minds of our era. He had two little short, I wouldn't call them specials, they're more like sets that came out. And like Dave, honestly, at this point, doesn't even do like stand-up comedy half the time. He more so does these TED Talks. But like he starts them off at comedy, and then like he feeds you your candy first, and then he gives you the vegetables and like getting your lessons in there. And I thought both of the little ones that he released this year were truly brilliant. Someone else who I personally really enjoy, who I forgot had a special come out at the very beginning of this year, was Pete Davidson.
Yeah.
He had he had a very fun special back at the beginning of the year called Alive from New York, where he just talks about really what his 2019 was like, his engagement to Ariana Grande and that falling through, and his, mental health and all that. And I thought it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Chappelle's specials, or whatever you want to call them, sets, were super just interesting. Like, the thing is, Dave Chappelle, I think, unless he like loses his mind, like when he gets old, I don't think, but like George Carlin didn't, so I think he'll be fine. Like, I think he'll never have something not interesting to say. Like, no matter what, even if you don't agree with it, it's still going to be super interesting. And I think his special, when did that come out? Was that, I guess it was like June, after all the George Floyd stuff. It was, it was super, super important and really like, it's hard to call it like a comedy thing, but it was really informative and super great. And Dave Chappelle's great. And Pete Davidson, I think this year, just shout out to Pete Davidson overall. I feel like I've kind of changed my tune on him. Like at the beginning of the year, I was like, he's like kind of not my style. But like the more I hear about him, the special I watched this year, it's just like, yeah, he's just a super interesting guy, and he has so much more room to grow. And
yeah, Pete gets a lot of shit, but like everyone who I've ever heard talk about him, who knows him, or the people I've met who have met him, all say that he's like just a really like a genuinely nice dude. So shout out to him one time.
With Pete Davidson's special, I didn't love the special. I do love Pete Davidson though, and when I was watching it, I thought to myself, this guy would have the greatest podcast of all time, because he is so interesting. Totally. And he has so many incredible thoughts, and somebody that people just don't understand. It would be a real shame for him to be gone before people were able to understand him in a real way, because I do think that the tabloids and God, I sounded like an old reporter. The tabloids,
the tabloids,
but they really pursue him as a celebrity, and he is really anything but. But yeah, so shout out to him. That's a good call. I think I'll have to rewatch it, because yeah, I think at the beginning of the year maybe I didn't love him as much as I do now. But yeah, so that's one I'll have to rewatch. And then with Dave as well, I mean, he's the greatest. That's all I have to say. He's the GOAT.
Dave is, and I'm sure I will talk about this on a later podcast on someday, is it's on our list of things to talk about. But Dave is truly like for a while there, he was like one of the greatest, but now I think he truly is the GOAT of comedy.
Totally agree.
And I honestly, I don't know if it's even that close.
Totally agree. I'd like to just shout out one. I didn't exactly love it. I was actually kind of disappointed by it. But I really thought Legalize Everything, Eric Andre special, was all right. I feel like I saw a lot of the jokes already. And from our friend Ian Buczynski, he saw him live. He saw the set live in Oakland, and he said it was just a lot better live. And I would agree with him. But Eric Andre is such, like, similar to Nathan Fielder, he's doing such absurdist comedy out there. And again, it's not like normal like setup and punch, but it is different. And I do like Eric Andre a lot.
Yeah, for me, this album, or this the stand-up special, didn't totally land. I'm a huge Eric Andre fan as well. When I was watching it, I just thought, like, he is known as sort of a deconstructionist, and when he's doing his show, it's very deconstructionist. It's deconstructing the late night talk show, and it's being very clever and very fun and very silly. I didn't feel quite the same way about his stand-up. I guess you can say it's deconstructionist because he's just doing things that other people aren't, but it's not as out there as his show is. And I felt like a lot of the bits on the special would have been better served actually on the show.
Yeah, like when he's like,
yeah, it seems like he would have been fun live.
Yeah, like when he's like, we have your parents here, and they're like two random actors. Yeah. And obviously when you're watching, you're like, oh, those are just two random actors. But in person, you're like, whoa, wait, what the fuck? Like, they could just bring these people out like this?
Totally.
But, you know, daring, and I like the opening a lot with the police officer character from his show.
Yeah.
And I think I follow him on Instagram, so, like, I think everything leading up to it was getting me super hyped, and it kind of let me down, but, you know, it was fun-ish.
I should take this moment just to say that I love stand-up, but I generally don't love stand-up specials. It's most of them don't work for me.
Yeah.
Either because it feels a little phony, it feels overly rehearsed, because obviously it is, because they have to do it a million times before they do the special. Or, I don't know, maybe sometimes I just think that the jokes are a little too obvious, even if I couldn't write them as well as they do, which I certainly can't. But for me, yeah, my list of stand-up is a little bit small because of that. There's a lot of comedians that I love their podcasts, but I don't necessarily love their comedy special. I think that for the most part, almost all of these comedians work really well in podcasting because they're just inherently funny people. But when they get their special, sometimes it falls a little flat for me.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I love live stand-up so much more than I do like pre-recorded stand-up. There is one special from this comedian that I really enjoyed. It's not really a special because he just released it on YouTube. But there's this and it came out like late 2019, so it doesn't really count, but I'm throwing it in here because I just want to mention it. There's this comedian, Mike Falzone, who has this stand-up special called You Got Toes that it's honestly one of the funniest, like, silliest things I've ever watched. It's a lot of crowd work in it, and he's just such like a lovable, likable guy, and I would highly recommend you check it out if you have 40 minutes or so.
Totally. And I think I'm going to transition to comedy unless you guys have more specials.
I have one more special.
I
got some specials, so I got one more.
Go for it.
All right. I have one more that I just want to talk about that I think was, of like actual specials, was my favorite of the year. And it's an HBO special from Yvonne Orji, who is a Nigerian comedian. It's titled Mama, I Made It. And she has such a wonderful stage presence to her just right off the bat. She has so much energy. It's such a fun hour. And just the way she structures the special itself is really smart. There's lots of great callbacks all throughout it. And it's a good time. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, even though I mentioned stand-up doesn't usually work for me, I actually do have, I guess, a fairly large list. I'll put these two together because they have a podcast together and they're best friends. And my one caveat is that I am definitely more of a sucker for the Los Angeles comedy scene because they all have podcasts and they all routinely go on each other's podcasts. So I guess I'm a little bit monoculturing myself, but like, whatever. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer both released stand-up comedy specials this year, and Tom Segura's is pretty good. Again, he's a guy who I like his podcast more than I actually like his stand-up, but it's always pretty fun. I always have a good time with it. Bert Kreischer is someone that like I would never hang out with. I would never want to be associated with. He's like so different from who I am as a person. But after having listened to his podcast with Tom a lot, he's a much more sweet person than he comes off as, because he is like a party animal persona. But there's more layers to him. But I actually thought his special this year, Hey Big Boy, was really good. Like, it surprised me how good it was, because I was expecting more of the party animal persona, which, I mean, he does his stand-up shirtless, so he still is that guy. But I thought there was a big leap between his previous special and this special with the joke telling, the storytelling, his presence on stage. I think he's getting better at stand-up as he goes along. And I was genuinely laughing a lot during this special, which surprised me. Keeping with the LA comics, Mark Maron, I thought, had a really good special this year. Again, a guy that I think I just have a lot of respect for. I like what he's doing up on the stage. I like his podcast. I like his persona. It is a little tired at this point, I think, but it works for me. I just like it. I think it works for me. Also, Taylor Tomlinson, another LA comedian. Whoop-de-doo. Her special I threw on just as like a thing to throw in the background, and then within 5 minutes I was actually hooked and I was in. And I thought her special, Quarter Life Crisis, was really funny. She's very clever, very bright, very energetic, very I don't know, she just gives me everything that I wanted out of a good hour-long comedy special. And then I have two more stand-up specials and then a couple of live shows that we'll segue into.
Yeah.
Both of these are on YouTube. Mark Norman, Out to Lunch. He's a very strange comedian. He's of the Seinfeld group where he just throws jokes at you. Just jokes. And usually I hate that, but in this case I thought his delivery and his joke telling was actually really good. He sort of is like a cheesier, older type comic where his performance and his cadence is very but it really works for me. I have a good time watching it.
Yeah.
Last one, Tim Heidecker, An Evening with Tim Heidecker. It is the most interesting deconstruction of stand-up. Again, usually I don't like this type of stuff, but with Tim Heidecker, he plays a version of Tim Heidecker who is really bad at stand-up. He goes out there and he bombs for about an hour, and the jokes are all super hacky. The jokes are all really bad, but it's all intentional and it's all ironic. And he's like, his character is like big into Trump, and he botches a joke, and then he'll say like, sorry, we're recording this for the special, so can we just go back and do it again? And then he loses the crowd because of that. And he has like a bit to open the show where he's like messing with his mic. All of it's really good. My only criticism is that he does about 45 minutes or so, and then he goes off, and then when he comes back on for his encore, he is no longer in character. He comes back out as real Tim Heidecker, and it kind of makes you go like, we knew it was ironic. He didn't have to tell us it was ironic, but really, right. Really fun special.
Also, just wanted to shout out one more special. I watched a few on Amazon. They're not the best ever. But I really do like Jimmy O Yang. His special Good Deal is like not like anything to write home about, but I think Jimmy O Yang is someone to look out for the next few years. And I think he just came out with a movie too about stand-up. So I don't know. I like Jimmy O Yang, Silicon Valley alum, and just overall chill guy, I think.
Are there any more stand-up specials before we go into some other live performances?
No, I touched on all the ones I wanted to.
Terrific. I have two real quick that technically are movies, but they're live productions that were filmed. It's Hamilton and David Byrne's American Utopia. Hamilton, we're all big Hamilton guys over here at this podcast. We've been listening to it since it came out. We got all the lyrics down. We know the show. And so when it came out this year, everyone got a chance to have what we had a little bit when we first got introduced to it. And it kind of felt like a second wind for a show that we all really love. And I thought it was a pretty well filmed stage performance. I didn't think it was anything to write home about, but it gave me what I wanted I've been very fortunate to be able to see it live in San Francisco. I know, Jack, you saw it live in New York with the original cast, and seeing it live is definitely the way to go. But it was a serviceable and fun presentation of the musical that we all love, and I'm really glad that I get to rewatch it whenever I want.
Yeah, and I also think in like a year like this where live theater is just non-existent, like I think it's really cool that everyone who wanted to had the option to rent Disney Plus for like a week and just watch Hamilton, and it was refreshing. Yeah. I really like it, and like it's funny, like it's 2.5 hours, but like for us, I think I can speak for all of us when I say like it just flies, because we know all the lyrics, we know everything, we know the scream, we know that song that's not in the album, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it was a real nice thing to have in 2020, which has been such a sad year for like the majority of it, but it was nice to have that little happy nugget in there in July.
Yeah, and then, as I mentioned, David Byrne's American Utopia, sort of the inverse of Hamilton. I'm a huge Talking Heads fan. I love David Byrne. I think he's sort of almost like a Mr. Rogers type figure, just a wholly innocent and kind person. And so whenever he does anything, I'm always on board. And this is so well filmed. It's so clever and so well put together. It was filmed and directed by Spike Lee, so of course it was good. It's a really good show. It's very earnest. It's David Byrne playing a Talking Head song and then talking to the audience about how half of the audience over here, you met on apps, and the audience over here, you guys met because you're just confident people. And then goes into talking about how we interact with each other and why it's amazing and beautiful to look at each other, and how the best feeling in the world is to look at another person. And then that segues into this beautiful love song, my favorite song by Talking Heads, This Must Be the Place. It's just very earnest, and it makes you feel warm, and it's like David Byrne's putting a blanket over you and saying it's going to be okay. That'll do it for this episode. Tune in for the 5th and final installment of this series, where we talk about the best YouTube channels, podcasts, and other social media. And that'll be dropping tomorrow on New Year's Eve. Thank you so much for listening. See you then.